Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Sharon Pendergast, and I'm a Senior Marketing Manager at Corwin. We are so excited to announce the publishing of Beyond Crises, Overcoming Linguistic and Cultural Inequities in Community Schools and Classrooms. It's published! Today, we're going to have the authors speak, and also before doing that, Dan is going to introduce them. But to make this exciting event even more exciting, we're going to give away 3 free copies of the book, which we will announce at the end of this presentation in the chat. And if you are one of those lucky winners, we'll private message you to get an address to send the book to as well. At this point, I would like to introduce Dan Alpert, who is our publisher extraordinaire of equity titles at Corwin.
Thank you, Sharon. There's a quote that's been attributed to Albert Einstein that goes, "In the midst of every crisis lies great opportunity." I don't know what Einstein was really thinking when he uttered those words, or if he even really uttered them. But I do know that at the height of the pandemic, it was hard to think about the great opportunities that lay before us. Most of us were too preoccupied with helping kids, helping families, or simply surviving. After more than a year of living on the edge, it seems like we may have reached a crossroads of sorts. Vaccine availability is becoming more widespread, mortality rates are down, our understanding of the virus and its consequences have become more nuanced, and help in the form of stimulus funding is on the way. Hindsight is 2020. We've learned a great deal and we continue to learn. Acts of bravery and human kindness have been widely publicized. At the same time, disquieting truths were illuminated, including the persistent and pernicious structural inequities that profoundly impact the course of lives. We learned that some groups fared better than others during that crisis. Those families that had access to technology, steady employment, along with adequate nutrition and health care, fared better than those without. And we also learned that one of the groups that experienced disproportionate degrees of harm during the pandemic was our nation's multilingual learners. Getting back to the Einstein quote, where do we find the opportunity beyond crises? I want to suggest that perhaps we didn't need to endure so much human tragedy to arrive at a universal truth, that we need each other. That at risk of sounding like a cliche, it truly takes a village to break down the walls that prevent our children from reaching their fullest potential. The authors of Beyond Crises, my dear friends and thought partners, Debbie Zakarian, Margarita Calderon, and Margot Gottlieb, know a thing or two about breaking down walls. They are the real deal, equity warriors who have dedicated their professional lives to serving our most underserved learners. They also know that the traditional silos between classrooms, schools, families, and communities are artificial constructs that only serve to perpetuate long-standing inequities. In fact, if there is any silver lining to be found in this crisis, it's a clarity of vision that allows us to see that normal was never good enough, that the long-standing barriers to access must come tumbling down, must be reconstellated in the manner of a healthy ecosystem in which our children occupy the central position. In that spirit of breaking down silos, I want to introduce you to 3 great thinkers, writers, and educators, Debbie, Margarita, and Margot.
Thanks, Dan, and hi, everyone. I'm Debbie, and I'm delighted to be here with colleagues Margarita and Margot. Thanks for joining us. We'd like to begin with this question. As we imagine moving beyond crises, what does that mean to you? Take a few moments to write a response in the chat box. And as you're writing, we'd like to share with you that we see crises, we see moving beyond crises, whatever they might be, as fueling our restart of what can and is being done to band together. I mean, after all, we're not silos unto ourselves. Our students, our families, our local communities, our classrooms, our school communities, well, they're all interrelated, interconnected, and even interdependent on one another. So let's begin by looking intentionally at what we mean by communities. That is, our families and our local communities. The power of these to support students to succeed in school and in their lives is something we have to consider. That is, when it comes to multilingual, multicultural learners, well, we often see them as broken or having something missing. Like when we hear people describe them, they might say, well, they don't speak English. Or they might describe their parents or families as being too busy, or that they aren't literate in English, so they can't help their child learn. Using that deficit-based type approach is the same as viewing students as broken, like these pieces of glass depicted here. Many of us are overcoming inequities by taking actions that demonstrate the overwhelming research about the importance of recognizing students' and family skills and assets and securing community partners who believe in the same asset-based ideology as we do. All of this helps each of our students to see and realize their strengths and be the unique mosaic that we see here. The influence of interactions is so important to consider. When a child is born, their parents and guardians, whether it's two parents, a single parent, grandparent, people living cooperatively, and more, help that child continuously. And as the child grows, so do their interactions. They expand to include their extended family, their friends, their neighbors, the storekeepers that their family visits, and others. In fact, when children come to school, their circle of influence and interaction expands to include us, their teachers, their principals, and others, and their peers, of course. And it expands even further to include their local community, such as children who experience soccer, dance, choir, all kinds of after and out of school activities. And as children grow, they participate in more and more circles of interactions as their life continuously expands. While we felt isolated during COVID-19, the degree of isolation that many multilingual, multicultural students have experienced before the pandemic has been exacerbated more intensely by the pandemic and is a blunt reminder of the urgency for overcoming the inequities that have existed for far too long in our communities, our schools, and our classrooms. In fact, children flourish when we map out a plan and create partnerships with and among families in our local communities to ensure that students really engage fully in the types of interactions that overcome barriers to health, well-being, and participating in after and out of school activities, service learning opportunities, and a whole lot more. In our book, we provide many examples from amazing contributors who show us what's being done to overcome inequities. Here are three. The Brockton Public Schools had their city of Brockton had one of the highest incidences of COVID-19 in Massachusetts. A top priority of its school superintendent, Mike Thomas, pictured here on the left, with EL director Kelly Jones, has been supporting the physical and emotional and social well-being of its students. In fact, Brockton, like many schools across the country, has seen reductions in its budgets. But that top priority of supporting students' physical and social emotional well-being has been a top priority. At the beginning of COVID, it purchased smartphones for its bilingual bicultural team pictured here. That was done so they could continue having the type of one-to-one family contacts that had worked so successfully before COVID. In addition, it created a family school call center staffed with counselors, nurses, advocates, bilingual bicultural community facilitators, and others to help families access health, food, and work assistance, and it offered these services to its staff as well. Wolf Street Academy, our second example, is one of the Baltimore public schools. Its principal, Mark Gaither, pictured here in the middle, continuously identifies its needs and finds resources and systems to address these. For example, it created partnerships with 3 community organizations who made regular donations of food to its families. Its teachers, staff, neighbors, and others delivered goods to families, especially families of essential workers. And its after-school coordinator, with help of family and community members, offer remote after-school activities such as robotics, violin, yoga, art, theater, and debate. Our third example is the Salina Elementary School in Dearborn, Michigan. Its principal, Sue Stanley, and site coordinator, Amal Kayed, have established partners with several community organizations, including the Arab Community Center for Economic and Social Services, Gleaners Community Food Bank, and the Amity Foundation. Its liaison role that Amal fills, like other examples that we've shared, acts as the point person. That point person empowers the success of all students by removing barriers and building partnerships with local resources to drive results. All of these schools and districts can best be described as nimble, multifaceted, multi-talented in using what we now call an asset-based partnership approach. They know the power of moving beyond crises. Whatever these might be and whenever they might happen, they provide us with tremendous examples of what can and is being done. We now turn to co-writer Margarita to look at the second of our 3 domains. We move from community partnerships to the school domain. Margarita?
Thank you. Thank you, Debbie. And good afternoon, everyone. We'll be sharing some more insights from the schools, from interviews, from research. And what we typically have found is that the key to success for multilingual learners is a whole school approach to implementation of the same professional development for everybody. All teachers, administrators, counselors, coaches participate in a comprehensive professional development institute at the beginning of the year. Then afterwards, the school administrators stay on for 2 more days and participate to put together and map out a teacher support system for the whole year. The role of the administrators is seen as a way to implement a whole school PD, but also to attend every single PD with the teachers and to get together to sustain quality implementation. Their messages on a yearly basis are to not just settle with compliance, but to go from compliance to excellence. And when it comes to instruction, every general education teacher at the elementary level and every core content teacher at the secondary level integrates language, literacy, and content. It says here with Excel, that's expediting comprehension for English learners, but it could be with whatever program is there. The important thing is to look at those gears, integrate vocabulary, reading and writing. And in order for those gears to continue to turn very smoothly, we need to integrate or sprinkle some of that social emotional learning in every single lesson. Instruction for ELS is no longer just the responsibility of the ESL teacher. When ESL and core content teachers are trained together, their team teaching designs improve and both take on responsibility for ELS or multilingual learners, as we see here in a writing lesson where they take turns. ESL teacher will pre-teach vocabulary, content teacher will teach about drafting, ESL will do text features, content teacher will do text structures. They both monitor the students and particularly ELS in their classrooms. Lisa, who we see here, is one of the persons we interviewed for our book, along with many other principals. For the schools, we interviewed 5 principals, and she had a classroom full of Sci students, but she always made sure that they kept at grade level and graduated on time. So when we asked her how she did this, she responded, creative scheduling by everyone in the school. Everyone participates in shifting schedules, the multiple interventions, mediations, and everyone tries to be a cheerleader. Here's what we can expect from any professional development program, but we've seen through research that after a PD institute, there's initial teacher knowledge and skill, but if there's no follow-up, there's going to be stagnation and erosion. And of course, worse yet, no impact on students whatsoever. So they continue each year and they become long-term ELs. But if after the training, there's a lot of follow-up coaching, teachers learning communities, more PD, more collegial interaction, the teachers will attain a high level of expertise, use of comfort, efficacy, and that will yield tremendous positive results for students. Here we see a whole school attending PD. Well, this was before COVID, but now they do the same virtually. And the school district also continues to support their efforts and attends the PD as well. Change is difficult. It's not easy. And here we hear from a couple of teachers. One says, it takes a lot of courage to change. It is easier when there is support from peers, coaches, supervisors. Another teacher says, moving away from generic instruction, what we're used to doing, is quite difficult. It takes time and collegial support. Now, at this point, in all our schools, we need to honor educators, our colleagues. We need to honor all the families in the community, the businesses that support us. And we need to love our students a lot more because they love us more, don't they? They missed us. They love us. They want to come back. And so think of a student, one of your students that you dearly loved, or a colleague if you don't have students, and put their face right in the middle of that heart on the left side. Isn't he beautiful? Isn't she beautiful? Now think of another student who you're just barely learning to love, or a colleague that also you're learning to love, and put that picture in the right-hand heart. Now, take a look at both of them and consider how beautiful these people are and how important it is for you to enlist your colleagues and do a whole school approach to make sure that all your multilingual learners are receiving the type of care, attention, and education that they merit. And now we're going to turn to Margot's section on the classroom. Margot.
Hi, everyone. Last but not least, but many of you live in classrooms day to day, whether virtually or in person. And so I want you to think back to that nested figure where classrooms are couched within schools and communities. So synchronized and working together, we suggest in our book that it's an amalgamation of these three educational vantage points, or ecosystems, as we say, and they offer a powerful antidote to linguistic and cultural inequities, which is the premise for our book. You realize that classrooms have always been at the crossroads of school and community life. However, when we reflect on the pandemic and the racial unrest of the last year, to some extent, I want you to start thinking that perhaps there have also been some unintended positive consequences. That is, has there not been a growing connection or interdependence, a blurring of teaching and learning between classroom teachers and families as teachers? I hope so. It's this intersection that occurs inside and outside of school where learning can be seen in this mural. In fact, this is a photo taken at a school very far away in Jakarta. When you walk in the door, and you can see that cultural imprint that is, you can see elements of the classroom, their homes, and their communities, and how they emerge into a brilliant display of student expression. So classrooms have never really been confined to brick and mortar buildings, and especially this year. But let's take, for example, the multidisciplinary learning that can occur when families visit a local market, where mathematics, economics, nutrition are all interconnected and can come alive for our multilingual learners. On the right-hand side, you might see an example of how school life has changed. Because when I was in the classroom, we had the wonderful opportunity to be able to take classroom field trips with our students as an extension of their experiences. But now we are being confined to Google virtual tours of museums. So we're looking for additional resources to make our classrooms alive. In our book, what we try to do is to underscore the importance of learning, not only associated with schools and classrooms, but that which is integral to families and communities. On the left-hand side of this slide, we see an example of street art and all its cultural messages. This mural happens to be in Melbourne. However, it could just as well have been in Chicago or Miami, Oaxaca, or even Berlin. The message here is that students should have opportunities to explore the languages and the cultures in their own community. On the right-hand side, we have another example for learning. Two friends that are just sitting outside on a step, engaged in a dialogic exchange. So in essence, what we try to do in our book is to portray a series of linguistic and cultural sustainable environments that are designed to help eradicate the pervasive inequities which tend to abound in minoritized communities. And through our joint advocacy efforts, we attempt to empower multilingual learners, their families, teachers, and school leaders by giving all of them a voice. So in this slide, we tap communities and families as partners in our educational endeavors. In our book, we try to make the conscientious decision to begin with communities so that the linguistic and cultural richness and assets can be a centerpiece for and foundational to all of schooling, and that the influences of family members can permeate our schools and classrooms. So in this last figure, we illustrate how communities, schools, and classrooms might overcome linguistic and cultural inequities as they work together as partners in the education for multilingual learners. These reciprocal relationships among the three ecosystems can bolster one another, and they serve as leverage points for instilling and perpetuating linguistic and cultural sustainability within and across schools. So admittedly, we have all endured some very tough times over the last year. We know that. And we can't predict what tomorrow is going to bring. We only can imagine it. Indeed, there might be some rough patches ahead, but let's be optimistic and project smoother sailing for our communities, our schools, our classroom teachers, and especially our multilingual learners. So we hope that this mini webinar has inspired you just a little to rethink the roles of communities, schools, and classrooms in overturning some of the educational inequities that have been exacerbated by the pandemic, and for you to envision a better future for our multilingual learners and their families. Here's our contact information and a little bit.ly to take a peek at the book. But now let's have that party begin as I turn it back to Sharon, who's going to put in some names in order to raffle a couple of books to some lucky listeners. Sharon?
Thank you. And thank you three for this informative and inspirational session. I hope you all enjoyed it as much as I did. The winners should be posted in the chat now. If you'll take a moment to private message us back with your address, we'll get those books right out to you. We did have 3 lucky winners of a free copy of the book, but don't worry if you didn't win. The book is available at www.corwin.com, and for a limited time, you may use promo code WEBINARS in all caps to receive 25% off the book plus free shipping. And thank you again for coming, and have a wonderful rest of your day.